What is happening here?
There's the short term and the long term. I think what's happening in the short term is that the same thing that we are talking about in the United States that Sachs is, very eloquently, basically, I think led most everybody in just really framing for a lot of people is this idea that, we have privatized free speech and we have put the distribution of information into the hands of 3 or 4 founder CEO oligarchs. That's also true in China. And when you look under the hood of the major internet companies, there's 4 or 5 guys that are in charge. And so I think that in the United States, politicians feel increasingly uneasy with those folks having power because it's applied indiscriminately. Trump gets banned, Trump may not get banned, this person gets distribution. This article is considered misinformation. That article is considered disinformation. This article is suppressed. It's a dangerous place to be. And in China, they were just like, enough's enough. So I think the short term, as it relates to the internet companies, was basically a realization that we are not going to allow any more devolution of power from the Chinese Communist Party to and into the hands of these internet entrepreneurs. So that was sort of like the...
So it's a move out of fear. They're scared they're going to lose their power base.
Not scared. I think they're just smart and they were like, we're not going to allow this to happen. So they don't have to deal with Section 230 or any law like that. I think it was just a realization that we want them to understand who is boss. Right. And so there was a wave of resignations. There was now all of this market cap upheaval. And this is now where we get to sort of like the appetizer. And I think in the appetizer, what they're basically saying is we will control how money is made and who makes money. And I think that sets up the really difficult thing that I think happens, which is about the long term. So in this thing, what's happening right now is China very firmly telling everybody, we are firmly in control. There is no private market and there is no capital market without our approval. And that's a really big statement. And in fact, it was such a big statement that I think the Chinese security authorities then had like a conference call at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all these folks were invited. And, the vice chairman, basically, his quote was something to the effect of, we promise that any more changes will at least let you know. Not, hey, there's nothing to see here or there's nothing more to come. It's just more that as we decide new rules, we'll make sure that we give you guys enough warning. So it's very much firmly saying we know exactly how money is made. We will decide who makes money in what way. And we're going to make sure that, all of this wealth creation happens under terms that we define. And I think that the setup for the long term. The long term in China is complicated. It is an enormous demographic time bomb. We've talked about this before. By the end of 2100, China's population will shrink from 1.2 billion people down to about 700 million people, right? So they had very progressive, quote unquote, under their framework, laws of one-child policy to basically make it economically viable in the 60s and 70s. There was such a number of people. Those people were able to get great jobs in the, 80s and 90s and 2000s. And now they've realized, oh, wow, we made a huge miscalculation because now there is just not enough people. And so China's going to shrink. And I think that, honestly, I think Xi Jinping probably thinks the simplest way to solve this is to basically nationalize a lot of the economy over time. And so if I was a betting man, which I am general, but I'm not in China because I just don't understand the market. It's super complicated.
Well, it's a rigged casino. It's a stupid place to bet.
I'm not going to say that. I just think that I don't know the market.
Well, I mean, if they change the rules of the game.
Well, hold on. Let me just finish what I was saying. I think that what we're starting to see is the beginning of nationalizations. And I think it's going to start in technology universe because those are the critical assets that the Chinese need to own for the future.
But there's no more game in terms of building companies and investing in China. Like, how is the West ever going to trust? How is Goldman Sachs or Sequoia, launching a venture firm there, or retail investors or hedge fund investors? How are they ever going to want to participate in that market?
So look, for example, when you invest in China, right? Or if you set up a fund, there are 2 pools of capital, right? There's the local renminbi denominated investment vehicles, and then there's the US dollar denominated investment vehicles. And they do that to segregate where the capital comes from. So it's not too difficult for the Chinese government to basically say, you know what, I'm going to actually make a constraint on dollar inflows so that, the renminbi denominated investment funds that are from Chinese investors into Chinese companies needs to be above a certain percentage, call it 2/3. Right? Or call it 80%. They can make all these decisions because these are all just rules that are completely under the control. So I think that people who don't think this is going to happen are probably not looking at the setup. The setup seems to be directing itself towards that outcome. And by the way, it makes sense for what Xi Jinping wants to do from his perspective.
But that's not my question. My question is, why would Masayoshi Son or another entity ever invest in China again?
Because you look through the risks and you got completely enamored by the population and the TAM. But what I'm saying now is,
well, why would they do it again? Or are they not going to do it?
No, but there are boundary conditions that would say that even before this, you would have had to reconsider. The population is shrinking. There's a different demand side pull that's happening, right? Older people need different kinds of services than younger people. There's not enough younger people. There's too many men. There's not enough women. So there's not enough couples. All of these demographic issues ultimately will get reflected in the economic reality, which is that smart investors would put money in China differently over time anyways. But I think that this is a bigger thing, as David said, which is if that's coming to pass, you want to control the pipes because you want to control how that information is presented to people, your citizens, so that they don't get pissed off. And then you might as well just own the economy, own the business anyways.
I see this as being amazing for American tech companies because I don't see who would ever want to be an entrepreneur. Whoever has a great idea and wants to pursue it in China, why would you do it?
No, I disagree with you. And the reason I disagree with you is...
And we don't have access to their markets anyway. What company has access to their market?
The difference is young, smart Chinese people for decades have been staying in China. In part because they could more relate culturally to Jack Ma than they could to Jack Dorsey. Mm-hmm. Okay, that just makes sense.
Sure.
And I understand that. And then the second is we, like the opposite of some other Western countries like Canada, closed our doors.
Why would the next Jack Ma start a company if they saw Jack Ma disappear? That's my question.
Because you know what? If you're coming from China and you can only make $1 billion versus $45 billion, I think you still take the shot.
I would come out in the middle and say they've just attached a discount rate. That now every investor has to consider political risk when they invest in China because the future is very uncertain. The bargain is getting changed. And if you're an investor, you now have to taking some huge political risk that you
I agree with David. I think that's a better way. I would refine what I'm saying by saying it's a distribution of risk where it's closer to Russia now than it is to the United States.
The China situation has been perplexing to me. You know, my position was always be careful working in China or investing in China. We're investing in Chinese companies because they could change the rules at any time and change the rules they have in the past year. We talked about, obviously, Ant Financial and Jack Ma going MIA, ByteDance's CEO and founder stepping down as CEO amid Chinese regulations and all the scrutiny. And then we have Didi last week being pulled from the App Store in an unprecedented penalty where you're not allowed to download Didi and the existing users can use it. And then on top of that, all the educational companies this week were told that they cannot operate as for-profit companies. And these companies have gone public in Hong Kong and in the West. And this has caused such an acute effect. SoftBank is clearing a bunch of its Uber position to cover their losses in Didi.